To create a Performance Max campaign, we need to combine several ingredients, some of which are required. We need a campaign budget, campaign of course, and then we need assets, and we need to link the assets to the campaign, so we need asset groups and asset group assets. Now, there is a gotcha. The campaign budget, the campaign itself, and the assets can be created in separate moments and with separate API requests, while the asset groups and the asset group assets need to be created together in a single request. You can think of this as an atomic transaction that needs to happen all at once. Asset groups can't be created without the required asset group assets, but the asset group assets need to exist within an asset group. It's kind of a chicken and egg problem in that you cannot create one before the other, so they need to be created together. So now you may be wondering, how exactly do I bundle the creation of different resources together in a single API request? One answer is by using the mutate method of the Google Ads service, although it's not the only one, as we will see later. Now, there are a few guidelines to be aware of when using Google Ads service.mutate, not just with Performance Max campaigns, but with any type of operation. As you can see, the request to this method takes a list of generic mutate operations that can be of different types to create different resources. You can combine asset group operations, asset group asset operations, and so on. The way to bundle different resource creation operations together, then, is to create a list of mutate operations and to add different types of operations to it. Here, for instance, we are adding an asset group operation and an asset group asset operation to it. Once we have our list of mutate operations creating different resources, then we can use it to create a mutate Google Ads request and then pass it to Google Ads service.mutate. This means that we can mutate different resources in a single request, and we can bundle together operations that belong together logically, like the ones to create asset groups and then to link assets to them by creating asset group assets. But that's not all. There's more. Now that we know how to bundle together operations to create different resources, we can take it one step further. If you remember, earlier we said that some of the required resources for Performance Max campaigns can be created in multiple API requests. But that doesn't necessarily mean they should. In fact, we can bundle the operations to create these resources together with the ones to create asset groups and asset group assets, effectively creating all the required resources for a Performance Max campaign in a single API request. But wait, this is not everything. There's even more. While we're bundling together the required resources, why don't we also add to the bundle the ones that are not required, the ones that are optional, like asset group signals or campaign conversion goals or campaign criteria? Well, we most definitely can. So now, let me ask you, does this mean that we should always be bundling all the resources we can in a single API request? Well, as to most of the good questions, the answer is actually it depends. There are advantages both in bundling requests and in sending them all separately. Sending each request separately where possible, in fact, allows for easier debugging and, in case of failures or errors, it lets you retry only the single requests that failed. Now, you might be thinking that you can still do this with bundled requests by enabling partial failure. But since asset group operations must be atomic, they don't support partial failure. Bundling operations together, on the other hand, is definitely more efficient and reduces your quota usage because you will be using fewer API requests. This means, for instance, that you can use the separate requests approach during the development phase of your application, when you want to familiarize yourself with the API and make debugging and troubleshooting easier. Then, when you want to scale up your application and its API usage, you can switch to using bundled requests. There is also another caveat to keep an eye on when bundling operations together, which is request size. There is a maximum size limit on all API requests, and especially if you are creating several images at once, you may be hitting that limit. To avoid that, One solution would be to create the image assets first, and then in a separate request, the asset groups, asset group assets, and the other resources.